So one of the things that Patchwork does specialize in is the social emotional intelligence. And one of the key tools that we use in our work is something we call a listening time. And so what we want to do is offer that to everyone here, to have that little experience of this social emotional tool that then you can take away from here and maybe use elsewhere. And so the way this works is that we set a timer for 5 minutes for each person. So like if Thomas and I were partners, it would be 5 minutes of me talking and you listening, and then we would take a pause and we do a kind of a question to get that whatever we were talking about out of our minds. We call it a thinking brain question, like how many shoes are in your closet, something like that. And then we'd set the timer, and then you have 5 minutes to just talk. And as the listener, my goal is to really practice listening. So instead of just sitting here and thinking about what am I going to do next, what am I going to do later, my goal is to sit and truly listen. Can I not just listen to what you're saying? Can I feel it? Can I actually feel what you are talking about and feel your feelings? So the listener gets to practice listening, and then the person talking also gets an opportunity to just go into their thought process. Because one of the things we believe is that people in general can solve their own problems. That when we give people space and time to think about their own problems, they will actually solve their own problems. And that is a real skill that we all need to have. So we do require that when we're doing listening time together, that we keep it confidential. The idea is that you get to take a little tiny practice and then walk away with this tool and maybe try it somewhere else. The next time someone calls you because something upsetting happened, just try listening. Just try not giving any advice, not saying anything. Just try feeling what they're saying and just giving them space to talk about it. We've taken these tools from numerous different places. Marshall Rosenberg, nonviolent communication. This is something used all over the world to help resolve conflicts. Something called handinhandparenting.org calls this listening partnership. That's a tool specifically for parents, but co-counseling models use this same thing, play therapy. So it's not something that we've just made up. These are tools that we've learned that really helps us as human beings to be able to become emotionally intelligent. So Daniel Siegel, who wrote the book Whole Brain Child, and also has written a version for teenagers called Brainstorm, came up with this idea of this hand model of the brain. It's just like a little metaphor for our brains. Most people have heard of the concept of fight or flight, right? That where that lives in your brain. This is my brain. Is in the stem here, which is like the reptilian brain, and that's where that's the part of our brain that handles threat response, survival, breathing, swallowing, all of those like critical, just how to stay alive, how to fight for survival. And then there's this sort of middle part of our brain, which is called the mammalian brain or the limbic system. And this is where we have emotions, relationships. And then there's the sort of the human part of the brain, and that's the part that kind of wraps around the top and the front, which is the neocortex and that prefrontal cortex right in the front there. And this is where thought, planning, logic, awareness, like lists, and all those things that we as humans are able to do, this is where that lives, is up in this top part. Unfortunately, there's a lot of ways that those places in our brain get shut off. Cortisol comes and lives here in the middle of the brain, and then you can't get to that, you can't access that thinking part of your brain, and that's this, cortisol is the stress hormone. If you're being chased by a bear, your brain is going to shut off all that other unnecessary stuff and go straight to the reptilian part, that threat response, and you are going to fight or flight. And we still have that, except that we don't have bears. So it's kind of a problem. We have to learn to integrate these three things and make sense of them. So what is ideal is if we can be able to use all three parts at once. And we can learn to do this, but it is hard to do. Is that if we can sort of sense the threat, like, oh gee, my child is picking up really sharp scissors, right? Your brain is starting to go to that like threat place. But then the emotion parts comes in and says, oh, I feel scared, right? And it's able to translate it into language, and you feel love for your child, you want to protect them, that's that part. And then if you could also have that top part come online and say, okay, everything's all right now, There's plenty of space between me and them. I don't need to panic. I don't need to flight. I don't need to fight. I don't need to yell and run or do anything. I can walk over calmly and say, whew, I feel scared because I see those really sharp scissors. Those are my sewing scissors. Can I please have those back? Right? So when all the parts are working, that's when it feels good. A lot of times that doesn't happen, right? We're stressed out, the cortisol is there, and it's because your thinking part of your brain was offline and you were only able to access this other part. So what we want to learn to do is recognize the threat, you can feel the feeling, and then you can choose how you want to respond. Oftentimes we have families that will come in and mention that their child has been labeled ADHD or a sensory processing disorder, dyslexia, various other things. And what we've noticed is that in an environment where students can learn at their own pace and they get to learn about their strengths and weaknesses and see those things as challenges rather than as disorders, a lot of those labels sort of fall away. It's not that the students don't think differently, like as in dyslexic students, or that they aren't sensitive to certain things. Definitely we have students that are very sensitive to noise or feelings or certain things. However, in an environment where they learn that that's just a part of who they are and how to see it as a challenge, it doesn't become a problem in the environment. I've often gone out into the space and heard students sitting around talking about their strengths and weaknesses. One child will say, I'm not that great at reading and I like to ask so-and-so for help. Or another one will say, numbers are really hard for me. That's something that I'm not so good at. Another student even mentioned at one point to a different student, I have been diagnosed with dyslexia and I've got this tutor and it's been working well for me and you should do the same thing. It's fun to learn to read. We really need to rethink how we're looking at this idea of labels rather than seeing any child who doesn't fit in the typical classroom setting to have a disorder. We need to just see each child as an individual and figure out what they need and help them see that as a challenge.
I remember it being a child and being rowdy and rambunctious and having my teacher write that on a report card and then feeling like that was who I was, instead of recognizing that, wow, I really like to run. And I need to run at recess. I need to move, I need to use my body, and then when I do that, I am much more capable of sitting still. And also, the non-punitive system to me feels really important because a lot of times, the students created this system of consequences for themselves to help each other regulate. And that was something that came about naturally and that they respect, but they actually don't use it as much as you would think that they might. They'll call a meeting, and the way that a meeting process works is that if somebody's having an issue and it's not working for them, they can try to get their needs met by saying how they're feeling and what they need and make a request. And if for some reason the other student's not willing to hear it, or they have kind of an opposing need, then they can call a meeting and they come together and they have more of a pause to sit with their feelings. They have a break between the meetings so that they can process and think about it, and then they say how they're feeling and what they need, and then it's on those two students to brainstorm solutions that will work for both of the parties. And so every once in a while, if that doesn't work, then a consequence can happen. But generally, they don't want that to happen. They're usually very open to hearing what the other person has to say and to really empathizing and understanding that perspective. And sometimes that takes a while. Time is definitely a factor in this, but I just find it so amazing that they don't jump to punishment. They jump to proactive solutions that are actually going to work and that they change the behavior. And because behavior is a need, it's a lot of times I think society sees behavior as this vindictive thing of like, I'm doing this specifically to, hurt someone else. And that might be true to some extent, but underneath that is oftentimes a need that's not being met.
It's becoming popular for schools to adopt sort of a bully-proofing curriculum. It's noble that people are wanting to bring this into the school setting. However, teaching students something in that manner isn't actually going to have much effect. Unfortunately, just telling them how to act is not nearly as powerful as showing and modeling and having them experience. And so all of that practice on a daily basis helps them learn that it is not only okay to have feelings, but it's okay to advocate for yourself, and it's okay to advocate for other people. Just the other day, There was a 6-year-old standing up for a conflict occurring between 2 children older than her because she knew that she had the power in the space to say, I feel uncomfortable. This person is saying stop, that this game has gotten too rough for him and he doesn't want to play it anymore. And the other 2 children stopped and listened. So any student in our environment is able to call a conflict resolution meeting just like any teacher or parent, and they learn how to stop pushing each other's boundaries so much. They learn this from one another.
Someone who comes and lays down the law and says, this isn't okay because this is against the rules, really doesn't give anyone the opportunity to actually learn that for themselves. I mean, what it creates is, I need to follow the rules because I'm afraid of getting punished, but behind the scenes, or when there's nobody to punish me, then I can do whatever I want. And that's really not what anyone wants. It's really important that we are able to show up as our whole selves.
We've had students come to our school who have been in another setting and been labeled a bully and really struggled. They had this mindset that there was something wrong with them, and it was very hard to overcome that. The victim also is in a tricky position because by being treated as a victim, that's giving them the impression that they have no power. And so instead of playing into the victim perpetrator and then rescuer role, the administrator then becomes this sort of a rescuer on the scene. It implies that people must find some kind of authority figure to rescue them. People need to know that they don't have to play the victim or the perpetrator or the rescuer, that they can just advocate for what they need.
I think we're seeing a law is that conflict arises when 2 individuals are not communicating what they're needing. And that's kind of our position to really scaffold and give them some words, but really also take space and not put words in their mouth. I think that's a balance that you have to find as a teacher, is to not speak for the child, but to help their voice come out.
Patchwork is so good. We can solve problems in a better way. So you call a meeting if somebody insults you, hurts you. For example, you hurt me and I call a meeting on you. Then you have 15 minutes to go to the meeting. If you don't go, you'll get a consequence. And a consequence is like no mushroom for a day, or no computer for an hour, or whatever like that. Yeah. So, and that if they don't like that and they regretted not coming to the meeting, then what they do, they can recall the meeting. Meetings are basically where you say your I feel statements, like, I feel mad that you did this, da.
Like, if I got a fight, I would say, I call a meeting, are you willing to stop? So then if they're not willing to stop, they have to come to the meeting.
And what happens inside of a meeting?
Like, they say, like, my I feel statement, like, I feel mad. And then someone else would do, like, I feel sad and mad. And some people do, I feel really, 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 like, a million times mad. Well, me and Brayden got called for a meeting from Jason because we were tackling him. So we made a plan for when next time it happens, well, we can both draw and take space.
Like, let's say somebody wasn't cleaning up. Then you could make an agreement, you could do half of it, and then ask other people to help, basically. So,
in my opinion, it works a lot better than at other schools, because there you go in, you get into a fight, it's usually a fist fight. So you get like hurt and then you get a punishment for doing that. Here, you would be separated and then you would see, like, if you're okay, then you would talk about your feelings and the conflict and what you could do differently next time.
Cool.
I feel like it's a lot more productive.
Nicole's my daughter. Such a sophisticated skill, but I think she got it probably at Patchwork. She said something like, I don't like this person in K-12, but I really care about them. Wow. But if you can have the capacity to be in a community and not like everybody, but still care for the community and care if this person that you don't particularly like, how they're doing.